Do you ever bother to read all these great interpretations about your work?
Can I just answer?
Yes, you can.
Up to this point, we can assert that what fundamentally differentiates the century we live in from the previous one is the disappearance of utopian projects and collectivist visions, which aim to place the individual on a secondary place in favor of the whole. Such an ambitious project could only be grounded with the help of an appropriate ideology, intended to instill in the collective imagination the desire, or at least the feeling of belonging to the created community. Today, this desire for belonging is more than an aspiration for security and comfort. It is a need for self-definition in relation to a set of beliefs and customs external to the individual. Along these lines, Andy Warhol's work can be interpreted as a response to the current attempt of individuals to define themselves by relating to an origin. What his art does is to depict instead the everyday reality, freed from the obsession of any origin. In 1949, Warhol arrived in New York, where he found an artistic environment dominated by abstract expressionism. What can be considered singular in the evolution of this movement in the American space is the notoriety it could achieve through mostly political motivations.
And the reaction, in human terms, is the only thing that is really satisfactory to the artist.
If the Soviet Union imposed on artistic forms to follow the rigid line of socialist realism as means of propaganda, what else was left for American art other than to represent the expression of freedom and individualism? In this sense, the serious forms proposed by abstract expressionism, with a strong individualistic character, aim to be the singular expression of the artist's interiority, managing to become the banner of freedom that America wanted to show the world. However, this elitist environment was not the fertile ground for the art that Warhol was to develop in the following years.
Do you have anything in mind when you start to paint?
Well, I just have to read a magazine.
You get ideas from magazines, man?
Yeah.
Intimidated by the major themes proposed by abstract expressionism, in which art became a means of exteriorizing various forms of pathology, he was forced to develop his own vision, independent of the dominant movement of the time. He opposed the gravity of abstract expressionism, which was inspired by the texts produced by Western modernism, to a detached vision, motivated by the American reality of that moment.
One of the major files on Warhol is about his film Lonesome Cowboys. The FBI was outraged that the Lonesome Cowboys were gay young men who swished around kissing one another. And there were serious to and from memos. Various FBI people worried that in a sense the United States was being subverted, perverted perhaps, by these outlandish gay cowboys.
An important moment in the artist's life is when he asked his friend, director and producer Emile D'Antonio, to appreciate two works, both depicting a Coca-Cola bottle, through a different approach. D'Antonio chose the blunt reproduction of the bottle over the one with traces of abstract expressionism, because the first would represent the reality they were living, while abstract expressionism was a stage that had to be overcome. This perspective, marked by opposition to his predecessors, is important for the analysis of Warhol's work, particularly for a series of works from the beginning of his creative years, like 5 Deaths, 11 Times in Orange, Orange Disaster, and Red Race Riot, all created in 1963. The violence that characterizes these works can be mistakenly attributed to an assumed tragic and grave vision by the artist, supported by the shades of red and orange which produce a strong feeling of anguish. However, This is not Warhol's intention. The works should be viewed and received as inevitable events, as an indispensable part of reality, not as the artist's intention to hierarchically address subjects distinguished by their depth at the expense of the banal.
Anytime you're in town and want to come by, we certainly will welcome you.
Well, thank you very much, Wink, and I'll see you again.
Okay, thanks a lot. Elvis Presley.
In the same year, Warhol created 3 other works that reproduced the figure of Elvis Presley, as well as 3 reinterpretations of Leonardo da Vinci's painting, Mona Lisa, in which any trace of violence disappears. The supposed depth of the first works does not apply to the later mentioned. All represent an equal interest for Warhol as an integral part of reality. In 1979, at Heimat Friedrich Gallery in New York, Warhol exhibited a series of 66 canvases titled Shadows. Each canvas captures in a distinct chromatic the same shadow devoid of the body to which it belongs. The reference body, around which the shadows should gravitate, by patronizing them, does not exist. The work overcomes the classic hierarchy between original and copy. Numerous interpretations might try to decipher what is the subject in question, as we have access to it only through its shadow multiplied in a delirious manner. In this situation, we cannot fulfill our obsessive quest for the original, which in normal circumstances should be capable of revealing the work's message.
Canadian government spokesman said that your art could not be described as original sculpture. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Why do you agree?
Well, because it's not original.
You have just then copied a common item.
Yes.
What the work in question does is to refuse the reference to an original model. The subject, whose shadows are shown to us, does not matter and should not be sought. Warhol's work aims to transcend the obsession of authenticity, which can be traced back in the European imagination to the parable of Plato. Plato's myth of the cave established a clear hierarchy between a primordial origin, the idea, and its representations in the real world, perceived as imperfect copies of the original. In another work, which depicts Mickey Mouse's double, both Mickeys are replicas of the same. There is no original to refer to, just as the 66 shadows do not refer to a body. The copy dominates the original, as the later ceases to exist, to be a reference point. We are dealing with shadows without history. Warhol's shadows are marks of absence, of the void specific to the American reality he represents. Depth is replaced by joviality, as shadows full of history are rejected through a conscious act. This attitude is the complete opposite of the European attitude towards art, which sanctified its artistic tradition. Warhol's work is the realization of this voluntary action, through the desire to represent mundane objects instead of major themes, which have constituted the subject of art for centuries.
What was the interest to you then in that Campbell soup tin? What gave you the idea of doing that?
Oh, I used to eat it every day. I still do, so.
Soup cans, or Coca-Cola bottles, can be elevated to the level of art, depending on perspective. The naturalization of major themes and historical figures, which dominated Western art, can be interpreted as an artificial action. Art is recognized as art not by relating to itself autonomously, but by relating to a viewer, a receptor, who recognizes it as art. This action, completely subjective in its essence, has been masked by a desire to objectify the artwork, by asserting its uniqueness and the innovation it brought, in a manner completely detached from the receptor. However, the viewer is the only one capable of recognizing a work as belonging to the realm of art, and in this sense, establishing its value.
We will require the use of a special paddle.
Marilyn Monroe's image hung over the auction, creating a frenzy of interest from the curious and the very wealthy bidders alike.
The diptych with Marilyn Monroe depicts the artist's portrait in the same manner as the shadows in the 66 canvases. Through seriality and repetition, her figure escapes the temptation of being mythologized through the game of reproduction. It is a conscious embrace of what Walter Benjamin considered the natural course of art in the era of mechanical reproduction.
Hello. We're off again.
Warhol's mechanical reproduction is aware of this reality and sees it as a form of release from the shadows of history. The diptych dedicated to Marilyn is a homage to a present reality, unconcerned with its historicization.
Scores of cameramen record the event as the presidential party leads a tribute to the lady who will play host to many, many thousands in the next 3 weeks.
This is the line in which Warhol's work that reproduces Leonardo's famous painting, Mona Lisa, can be understood. If in 1919, Duchamp exhibited the Mona Lisa with a mustache, in an attempt to reduce the erratic character of the work, which fascinates and intimidates the viewer, Warhol managed to truly annul the aura of the Mona Lisa through multiplication. Ironically titled 30 Are Better Than One, the work displays 30 copies of Leonardo da Vinci's painting in one piece, with the original colors replaced by the sobriety of a black and white ink reproduction. The original painting's particularities disappear in this conglomeration, as they are no longer of interest to Warhol's viewer. This viewer belongs to a world where iconic works become widely consumed goods, and the original is no longer of interest.
You want them, those who buy your work, to keep it and study it and live with it.
And then sell it.
Resell it.
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's like everything else. I think everything else should be recycled, like leftover food at restaurants.
The impact that the original might have had on someone seeing it for the first time disappears with the era of reproducibility, and Warhol's works embrace this decline of the aura, of a past with which American society cannot identify. Instead of the sanctified figure of the Mona Lisa, he proposes the figure of Marilyn Monroe, with a clear awareness of the subjective nature of the aura. Warhol himself says, "I think aura is something that only somebody else can see, and they only see as much of it as they want to. It's all in the other person's eyes. You can only see an aura of people you don't know very well, or don't know at all. I was having dinner the other night with everybody from my office. The kids at the office treat me like dirt because they know me and they see me every day. But then there was this nice friend that somebody had brought along who had never met me, and this kid could hardly believe that he was having dinner with me. Everybody else was seeing me, but he was seeing my aura." What the artist notes about himself can equally apply to his artworks, as the aura emerges from the indispensable relationship between the viewer and the object observed. Warhol's art embodies the recognition of this voluntary act of sanctifying a tradition that he no longer finds representative. He deliberately shifts the focus from an idealized past to the present moment.
He's interested in absolutely everything. It's a wonderful kind of naivete. I mean, he just, watches things, which is, filling up his brain for his art.
In a 1962 work titled Gold Marilyn, Warhol places the actress's face on a golden background, making this work the closest attempt by Warhol to copy a painting with a religious character. However, we should not stop here. The actress's bold makeup and distinctive smile do not in any way refer to a religious figure. On the contrary, it is a failed attempt at sanctification. Her face seems to be printed on the golden surface of the work as an artifice, not as an integral part of it. Again, the artist's portrait escapes mythologization. There is nothing erratic in this work, but Warhol's intention is clear. In the absence of a past that can be idealized, one is left only to expose the present.
What is pop art anyway? How would you define it?
I suppose if you had to make a definition, it would be painting or sculpture that revolves around commercial imagery or industrial images. Signs and symbols from the everyday life. Things that you see all the time, repeated interminably, done in a sort of very stylized way.
Pop art does not signify the end of representation, but proposes a reality free of anguish, where the absence of an original is no longer a dramatic event. In line with Walter Benjamin's view on idols as products of people's need for heroes, Warhol exploited this need by depicting numerous famous personalities. He portrayed actresses like Brigitte Bardot, Marilyn Monroe, and Ingrid Bergman, singers such as Mick Jagger, and political figures like Che Guevara, Mao Zedong, and Lenin, all treated as universal idols and pop figures of their time, despite coming from different domains. In this context, Warhol aspired to become a pop figure himself. His transition from a commercial artist to the esteemed realm of high art was driven by his desire for celebrity status. His remark about the relationship between art and business underscores his ambition. Business art is the step that comes after art. I started as a commercial artist, and I want to finish as a business artist. Being good in business is the most fascinating kind of art. During the hippie era, people put down the idea of business. They would say money is bad and working is bad. But making money is art, and working is art, and good business is the best art.
Are there any famous people you haven't met you'd like to meet?
No.
You've met them all?
No. Just some nice horses.
Some nice horses you haven't met yet?
Yeah.
It is undeniable that Warhol profoundly transformed American culture. He turned his own persona into a mirror of the capitalist system in which he lived, exposing its underlying nature with stark clarity. His art debunked the idealized image of an American democracy, promoting equality by portraying it at the level of consumption, as he emphasized. What's great about this country is that America started a tradition where the richest consumers buy essentially the same things as the poorest. You can be watching TV and see Coca-Cola, and you know that the president drinks Coke, Liz Taylor drinks Coke, and just think, you can drink Coke too. A Coke is just a Coke, and no amount of money can get you a better Coke than the one the bum on the corner is drinking.
Okay, let's start. Oh, I'm nervous. I never had a famous leg.
Warhol succeeded in revealing the true essence of America in his art, highlighting its obsession with idolizing celebrities. His work provoked and angered critics, who were compelled to seek deeper meanings. Additionally, his pieces embodied the simple pleasure of viewing visually appealing objects, reflecting our current hyper-aestheticized society. Warhol intended his work to stand alone, as minimalistic representations that were as close to nothing as a picture of something could be.
So where have you been?
I was on television. You didn't see my channel 7 just a little while ago?
No.
I was at a cowboy party.